What is a therapeutic coach, and why more people turning to therapy as a guidance in a world that feels increasingly fast and complex? According to research, people are increasingly looking for a deeper meaning in life as a response to profound global instability, the erosion of traditional community structures, and a growing awareness of their own mortality. This search is driven by a need to feel that our existence has purpose, coherence, and significance, particularly in a post-pandemic, the quote-unquote wake-up call time that has highlighted the fragility of life and shifted values away from pure productivity. That's why today we are exploring a topic that sits on the intersection of self-awareness, purpose, and personal growth, the therapeutic coaching. Welcome back to another episode of Chatting with Slava the Jordanian. I'm your host, STJ, and I would like to start by introducing my guest. Destry Wardle has spent more than 22 years walking alongside people in their deepest places of pain and transformation. Through her work with Healing Care Ministries, she has led intensive retreats that help individuals encounter God as the source of healing and wellness in the midst of life's brokenness. Destry creates safe spaces for people to process grief, rediscover hope, and experience the transformational power of connection with their Creator. She also serves as Chief of Staff for an executive coaching firm focused on developing healthy leaders and helping people build lives of purpose and impact. Destry holds a master's degree in clinical counseling and lives in Colorado with her husband and their 2 daughters. Welcome, Destry, on my podcast. I am so excited, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here and to be in this conversation.
Oh my gosh. Stop it. All right. So we have met through, just a little bit background, we have met through a mutual friend, and actually through Dana, who is my life coach. And I got to the point that I just needed more of the validation of my spirituality. And I shared this with Dana the other day when we taped our episode, that since I have been under Dana's coaching and under your coaching, my faith got stronger. Now, just again, a little background as far as our difference in the belief system. You're Christian, I'm Muslim. I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia, and I came here when I was 19. You're an American from the West Coast. So we are from totally different worlds and different cultures per se, but yet I have found so much in common with you and Dana that really pulled me up from, I don't know, I can't tell, I don't want to say the doubt, but I want to say the lack of affirmation and lack of clarity of the resources. So in a sense that you guys didn't give me the resources, you just helped me get clarification to find my own resources, because of course you guys have a different faith. Yeah. So, we have so much ground to cover, so I'm just going to plunge right into it and start with my question to you. What led you to get into the therapeutic coaching? What's the story behind it? Since this platform is all about storytelling, we love stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, I got right out of college, ended up going to grad school and got my master's in clinical counseling and worked in the mental health field for a while. And my work there, while I learned so much, and I really realized how privileged I had grown up and did not really understand how broken some people are and the broken places that they come from. I ended up feeling like I was putting a Band-Aid on gushing wounds, and really kind of had to sit and ask myself what I was doing, if what I was doing was actually really helping. And while I do think, in the end, I do think there is definitely a place for, traditional clinical counseling. That experience really, forced me to kind of dive into, my faith, diving into this place of wanting to, help people, not just process trauma, but help them get to a place where they are moving forward in their life, where they are able to get to a place where they can begin to, activate, some of the skills that we're learning as we're processing trauma. So, a lot of those years really ended up, were spent in a place where I was working with a nonprofit, Christian agency called Healing Care Ministries. And we would do intensive retreats, where people would come in from all over the world and would spend 8 days with us while we were really processing trauma. We were processing some things that, for some of them, it was stuff that happened very early in their life that was now showing up in their present. For others, it was, real time, trauma that was happening, in their life. And we were, processing how they were able to navigate that. And I love that work, and I'm still very much attached to that work. The thing that kind of moved me towards joining, the coaching firm that I'm a part of, the Dauphinee Group, which is the space I share with Dana, was that I wanted not just to hold this space of helping people process the trauma, going back into the past to grieve the ungrieved losses, but I also wanted to help them build some resilience and some skills on how to get to their preferable future. And that's where kind of the coaching work comes in, right? Coaching therapy traditionally is, very grounded in the past, to understand the past, to process the past. Therapeutic coaching was really going to the past for the purpose of, moving forward into the future. And I just felt like that was a good balance that I wanted to hold with, with doing both, like very much holding both spaces for people. And that's what I've been doing for probably the last 4 years.
You mentioned a couple of things that I can relate to, because when I met you, I just lost my father-in-law in 2022. And that's when I met Dana, and then I met you. And you just mentioned the word grief. And after attending you guys' sessions, I always try to reflect. And, like I said in the beginning, you helped me find the triggers and how how am I going to regulate myself from the trigger of the trauma. How we found my father-in-law was very, very traumatic. Nobody deserves that. Nobody deserves to, pass away or die alone without saying goodbye, and we don't know, having the unknown of, did he suffer, did he try to call for help? There's so many unknown. There's a lot of question marks flying over that event, that tragic event, that because we cannot get the answer, or we couldn't get the answer of that, there was a lot of there was no closure, and then if you don't have closure, you don't have the healing. It's like, okay, this is, I have the answer, I can move on. But it is fascinating. It is trauma. Whether I couldn't call it trauma per se, I couldn't name it, but I felt it so powerful and so strong. And it's almost like I lost my anchor, because, between my in-laws on my parents, he was the third one to go. And then now my mom is still alive, but she has dementia. So she doesn't really know my name. So it's your anchor, your roots have just dissolved, and you feel like you just, the free fall emotionally, you just have the free fall. You don't know, I cannot pick up the phone and let him know that, hey, how you doing? This has been bugging me. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have the clarity or the guidance from that traditional tribal connection. And that's why, I seeked that kind of coaching because it wasn't like medicated needed. It was almost like I could not find my way.
Yeah.
And that affected my belief too and my spirituality. And I just, I couldn't even get myself to be calm enough. And I felt like I wasn't even worthy because I had so many questions for God. Like, why did you let him go that way?
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't deserve it. And who am I to question that? And that, in response to that, I felt the guilt on the other side. It's like, how could you question God? That's God's will. And then I became like, okay, I'm not worthy praying for God because I just offended God, and his will and his destiny. And that was my father-in-law destiny. But I was mostly like advocating for my father-in-law, like he deserved better. And that was the clash of both worlds, the logic, the reality, but also the spirituality. I had just so much clash every day, all day, every day, until I met you. And then kind of have that clarity, the guidance and the clarity is like, okay, it's not as simple as that. It's deeper than that. It's more complicated than that. And let's just break it down. And breaking it down. And one of the things that I repeat on my episodes that Destry taught me to name it, to feel it, to heal it. And those are the things that I learned from you. So while you're coaching, just defining for our audience and our listeners, therapeutic coaching, is it fair to say that we can definitely tie to it spirituality and belief system?
Yeah, I want to just comment on something that you said too, because I think you called out something really important that, for much of the healing work that I do, it really is centered around ungrieved losses. Not having, I think there are things that happen to us. I believe it was Gabor Mate that talks about that trauma isn't actually the event, but it's the thing that happens inside of you as a result of that event. And when you have no empathic witness, you have nowhere to go to process the loss or the different layers of, like you named, the anger, the questioning, all the stages of grief. When we don't have a witness to that, we often get stuck in that place. Like, life keeps moving forward, right? But there's a part of us that gets kind of frozen in time, so to speak. And that part of us is not able to develop well. So, you talked about really naming that you recognized there are ungrieved losses in me. There are parts of me that are, frozen in time, so to speak, that I need to go back to, that I need to, kind of reclaim, give voice to, allow those pieces of me to grieve. And that is a lot of what I do in the healing space and the therapy space, is really creating a sacred space for them to, get up and out, what they've lost, the experience that people have had, the experiences of loss that have, here in the United States, I really think we have a very poor, cultural norms around grief. The way that we grieve loss, whether it's death or just loss of jobs, loss of homes, it's very much, move on, just keep moving forward. And so to create a space that is safe and sacred, and I think the sacred part comes in that, Dana and I use the tool, the Clifton Strengths tool, as a way of understanding ourselves and really, helping other people understand themselves. And one of my top strengths is connectedness. And that strength really shows up in my life as I need to have something bigger than myself to go to. I need to believe that there's something bigger than me that is, in control of this life in some way. And I think that people who have a connection to their spiritual center, to their belief in, a greater power, whatever you want to call it. My belief in God, is so critical and important to the grieving process. I use the scriptures. I use Psalms as an example of how, that kind of gives us permission. If you go spend any time in the scripture, in the Psalms or the book of Lamentations, you see that there was full freedom to express the anguish of the psalmist's soul, of what they had experienced, how they saw the world. No matter if it was accurate or not, there was permission given for it to be expressed. And so I believe that you can't move forward if you are stuck in a place, if there is ungrieved losses that are keeping you, that are presenting hurdles or obstacles in your way. So the therapeutic coaching for me comes together with, we want, the motivation is, I want better for my life. I want to be a more whole person. I want to have this way of being that allows me to be connected to myself, to others, to the world around me. And if we find that there are some obstacles, like ungrieved losses, and that have created emotional patterns or distorted beliefs or dysfunctional behaviors that I'm using to keep that grief at bay, then I want to be a person who is able to sit with somebody through the discovery of those things, so that they can become that more whole person. They can reclaim the parts of themselves that have gotten lost in those places of grief.
I agree with you 100%. But in the interesting realization that I came to after the first session with you was the loss of my father-in-law was the most impactful loss of a family member in my whole life. And I couldn't understand why, my dad passed away 2014. My mother-in-law passed away 2016. She was like literally my best friend. And after 7-8 years struggle with Alzheimer's, the whole going through the stages of forgetfulness, confusion, and not knowing who you are, not knowing your name. It's sad. And then my father-in-law, 2022, my mom got sick and she had the stroke. She ended up with dementia. And I was sad about it, but I was okay. I moved on. And then my father-in-law in 2022, I think the way we found him, the way he left us or left this world was very impactful. And then I realized that, hold on a second. I've been with him longer than I have been with my parents. I left my home world at age 19. When my father-in-law passed away in 2022, I was almost like a little bit over 30 years with him, living with him, known him, as an adult. And it's amazing how certain figures in your life that you are with during your adulthood impact you more than, your childhood, because your childhood becomes the past. This is the present. And also you build upon it or you play upon it for your future. That's who I am now. And that's who I am as the matriarch of my family, as the senior member of my family, of all the teachings and all the lessons and all the memories and all the stories and all the experience I had with him. Sure. And also we grieved together after my mother-in-law had passed, because my husband's the only child. It's not like there are other siblings that you can, bounce things on, like my side of the family. So it was just me, him, and my husband, and we just stayed together as a little small tribe, supporting each other, grieved together, healed together. And now he's gone. And I'm like, why is this hitting me so hard? Like, I have lost family members before, senior members of my family. And because of your coaching and your leadership in emotional leadership, I came to the conclusion that, Slava, don't be too hard on yourself. You need to realize that you spent almost 3 decades with that person, intimately with that person. I lived with them.
Yeah.
I went through my toughest years of my adulthood. They were there for me, or he was there for me, supporting me, cheering me on. It's like, okay, get up. Come on, let's go. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
That was the traditional, the family support that I had here in the United States, while my family across the world were over there. They became more of acquaintances, so to speak. Like, I pick up the phone. It's like, hey, how's it going? But he was here, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, thick and thin, health and sickness. We were just supporting each other. And again, not realizing that until he passed, and then sitting with you and sitting with Dana and figuring out the why.
Yeah.
I didn't know the how, because I had to figure out, I knew the what am I feeling, but I didn't know why am I feeling it and how to actually heal it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think 2 things that occur to me in this is, when I'm sitting with somebody who, recognizes, like, man, I've lost family before, I've lost jobs before, and this loss just feels so much bigger than that. Part of the questions that I'm asking, one, I think when we have built some sense of identity around a person, a place, a thing, and that gets lost, we're not just losing that thing, but we're losing something of ourselves. And we have to, again, go back to, who am I without this? Who am I without my, kind of cultural connection? Who am I without this title, or, who am I outside of this relationship? And so a lot of this is it. And I think this is where the spiritual practice of, is my identity rooted in my job, my relationship, my family, or is my identity rooted in, my creator and the relationship I have with my creator? So that's, another big part of, we're unpacking and kind of peeling the layers around identity and reclaiming identity as it should be. I am of the firm belief that if you, when you put your identity in anything that you can lose, and I can lose anything, right? Like, everything can be lost in this world except for my connection with my creator. And so when we experience loss, their identity is a part of that. The other thing is, I think that, we were created, as people with longings. It's what separates us from all the other creation in the world. And, we were created to have a longing for significance, for purpose, for love, for safety, for understanding. And when, we seek that outside of, I think those longings were placed within us. The original purpose for those things was to be, as a way for us to connect with God. And when we place those longings into other things, when we lose those things, there is this sense of, I feel an absence of love. I feel an absence of purpose. I feel an absence, a deficit. And so we're feeling the void of that thing. And part of, some of my spiritual practices, just for me, are to continue to realign. Okay, my relationship with my husband is certainly a resource for love, for safety, for significance, but it is not the source. The source of that for me is really found in the purpose I feel in my connection to my creator. And while my husband may be a place of safety for me, there are certainly times where there is, that isn't something that is available to me at the time. But I don't have to respond to the loss of that as, this feeling of death or this feeling of complete, I don't, absence of it. It's, oh, okay, I do have that here. And so grief is kind of that realigning that while you feel the pain of a resource of safety or a resource of love or a resource of significance, being eliminated or being at a deficit, I'm not operating out of this fear that I'm never going to get that again. Does that resonate or make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you right now, I'm going to share this with you. In Islam, we were taught and we were encouraged not to be too attached to this world, right? Because, you have to, if you are too attached to this world, you become almost like addicted to the world, and you want to do more, and nothing is good enough, nothing is big enough, nothing is rich enough, nothing is enough. And then you become greedy, and greed, we have a saying in Arabic, greed is going to divide and it's going to cause the loss of everything that you're trying to build. That's why we pray 5 times a day. Like, remember you told me in the session, Slava, I just want you to take like 4 times a day. I want you to take a minute or two, just go into stillness. And I shared with you, it's like, oh my God, that's why we're taught to pray 5 times a day, by the sun moving through the day, which is the morning, noon time, and then between noon and the sunset, and then sunset, and then before bedtime. And I finally recognize, okay, this is not like a religious only teaching, just to follow the footsteps of, this is actually, there's a science, behind it. So, but also that's why we go back to the divine. We go back to our creator, reconnect with him 5 times a day to remind us that this life is not forever. Absolutely. This life, whether it's going to end at some point in Judgment Day or we are going to leave this life at some point, it's really more important to stay connected to your to the divine, to stay connected with your spirituality in order to help you transition later, whether you're going to end up dying, leaving this world, leaving everybody behind. It's almost being on stage and acting a role in a play. It's when the lights are on, you're on. When the lights are off, everything ends, and everything is, it's not like fake, but it's not really the spiritual reality that we are taught to believe in, So that's one of the teachings that we teach our, the young, since we're young, we start teaching our kids is like, don't worry too much about this world, don't get stuck on, and be OCD about what's going on around you. You need to detach yourself, shut yourself off, reconnect, and then you can go back, and you're going to go back dealing with whatever situation you need to deal with a lot stronger, a lot wiser, with a more logical, realistic way. So, but I did not realize what you just said, and you're absolutely right about the identity. And I think and I believe right now, that's how I felt when I lost my father-in-law, because as probably agree with me, every time you lose a family member, that's part of the identity is gone, right? Because the connection is gone. And I felt like somebody just put blindfold on me, and I just lost my way. It's like, okay, where am I going? I don't know, who I am. Also, there was a shift of identity and a shift of role because, like I said, now I am one of the matriarchs of the family. I'm the senior of the family. Everybody now comes to me and call me. It's like, okay, Slava, what I need to, nieces and nephews and all that. So I was like, oh my God, where's my mom? Like she's not around, or I cannot, like I said, pick up the phone and call my father-in-law, my mother-in-law. It's like, all right, I have no idea what to say about this. I have to figure this out by reflecting and playing upon what they taught me. It's so that's what we call the transfer of power through the generation. But going back to what I mentioned earlier when I introduced the episode, the erosion of traditional community structures, and that's what you were talking a little bit about it. It's because of it's almost like we're living in a very fast paced life with having to always dig deeper though and slow down. It's almost like it's a struggle, right? We want to keep up with the fast-paced life, but also at the same time the human spirituality and humanity hasn't evolved over time to accommodate that speed. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
it's almost like a struggle that we need to slow down, but we have to keep up. We need to slow down. And that's a lot of pressure on us too. Do you agree?
I do agree. I think that, it's a complex, there's so many layers of, complexity in what our cultural expectations are and then what we were built for. I think, I know this is, kind of coming out more and more, but just our access to information, right? Like what's happening around the world. I don't think we were ever created to know as much as we are able to know right now. Our brains weren't created to process as much, violence and hardship that is just kind of thrown at us right and left if we're consumers of social media, consumers of news all the time. And so we are constantly having to shift through what do I do with this information? Like I have all this information and I only have so much agency. I only have so much control about what I can do with that. And so I do think that there is a growing return. I really love, and I am sad that even in my, non-denominational tradition of, where I go to church, we really have lost a lot of, sacred ritual. I think that earlier belief systems were really excellent at creating, rituals. I think we can become overly rigid to rituals, that we want to use rituals for the purpose of allowing ourselves to move through life in a more intentional, way. And so, like what you said, I love that, using the sun, the placement of the sun in the sky to be a reminder of that pause of, okay, what is it that I've attached myself to that is not serving me, is not serving the vision that I have for my life or the calling I feel on my life. How do I let go of that? One of the practices that I invite a lot of my clients into is the practice of benevolent detachment. I think, I'm a person who kind of is more task oriented. And so I can set, this is what I have to do with the day. And I can get to a certain part of my day where I've collected all kinds of things. Some of those things are things for me to hold. And many of those things are things that were never meant for me to hold. And so I have to do the work of like benevolent detachment. I'm separating myself. I'm laying these things down, not as things that, they're taking up space in me that is hindering me from being able to move forward in my life, move at the pace that I need to be moving at in order to pursue my vision of life. So there is this place of continual like pause. Okay, I release and relinquish the things that I don't have control over. Maybe there is a place of grieving. I think that every loss in life demands an appropriate moment of grief. We got to acknowledge those things so that we're not carrying them into what ends up being, roadblocks on our way to our vision and our calling.
It's fascinating when I read some of the things that the younger generations are struggling with, because I have 30 employees through all three practices, and it ranges. I have Gen X's, I have millennials, and I have a Gen Z. Now, the interesting thing, I'm not trying to judge any generation. The millennials, I feel, are the one at loss with their emotions and your spirituality. The one thing that I see that really warms my heart, that Gen Zs and iGens are almost trying to go back to that traditional aspect of slowing down. They're very, very cool. They remind me of us in the 80s. They're like, okay, chill, relax, and they are not, there is a movement of not anti-social media or anti-digital devices, but they have recognized, I think, reflecting on what the millennials had to go through and how they are so attached to the, digital information, digital data, and they are going through a burnout, emotional, I think spiritual, burnout, the millennials more than the Gen Zs or iGens, that it's definitely, there is definitely a need to disconnect.
Yeah.
And those 5 times of prayer, it takes you like 5 minutes to pray. You know what I'm saying? And you're not supposed to rush through it, but it's very, very, very simple, ritual. It's not that complicated. You don't need a book, you can, and it's very liberating too, but it's just like any device, a human body, the way that I explain it, it's like a device, right? You charge, perform. There's so many applications going at the same time.
Yeah.
And what our parents are saying to their kids, put down the iPad, put down the phone, go play outside. And that's exactly the break that we get when we pull ourselves from reality, from whatever situation that we are trying to deal with, disconnect from reality and have that stillness moment to recharge, recalibrate. And the funny thing is, every time I pray, whatever time of the day, and then I go back into reality after I'm done, I see things differently. They're not affecting me the same way because I took that time out to just kind of cool down and ground myself. And it's automatic. It's something inside of me actually recharges. And I was like, oh, it's not, the task at hand is not bothering me anymore.
Yeah.
It's the mindset, how that mindset shifts just because you took that 3-4 minutes to disconnect. Now, I read something and I want to share it with you, and I want to hear your opinion. So I read something that says these days, maybe spirituality is not all about having all the answers, but about having the courage to ask deeper questions about who we are and how we want to live. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think you were talking about generations. And I think, I have 2 daughters. One, is 23. One is 21. And so I see in them and their friends this search for purpose, this search for, they don't want to just do things that aren't connected to something deeper. And so I think, and I love that. I think that is a hopeful way to look at this upcoming generation that is looking for meaning in what they do. They've watched the generations before them pursue, money, titles, power, influence, and get to that place and still be unhappy. So while they may still be pursuing those things, they want to pursue it with a sense of purpose and meaning. One of the books that was a transformational book for me too, actually. One was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And then the other one was, The Choice by Edith Eggers, who was actually, Viktor Frankl was one of her mentors. They both are survivors of Auschwitz. And they Viktor Frankl's work was very much about, finding meaning as a way to survive the challenges. Certainly they had extreme challenges to, and it was, how can you go through something like that and still be connected to your, to creation, to your creator, to identity. And it was finding this deeper meaning in what was happening to them. Edith Eggers was, her and her sister survived Auschwitz and had very different responses to that experience. I highly recommend you reading her book, but she went on to become a psychologist and worked with people. And even through her working with people, was able to rediscover meaning and purpose in the things that she went through. And so a lot of, people who come to me that are really struggling with even their own disappointments, their frustration that life is not what they thought it would be, that they're feeling, frustrated with the limitations that they have, are navigating. As I find space to kind of help them find, what is that forging in you? What's the deeper way of being that you have agency over? That's going to connect you to purpose and meaning, that really serves as an anchor through a lot of difficult storms that none of us gets a free pass from suffering. We are all going to experience that in life in one way or another. And if we have no anchor in purpose and meaning, then those storms are going to cause a lot of damage in our life. So part of my life's purpose or my life's work is helping people discover that anchor to meaning that will allow them to come through those storms with a greater resilience, with a greater passion for, with a greater understanding of what they are now equipped to help others navigate.
No, it makes sense. It's almost you build this armor, right? Armor that, repels a lot of the unnecessary kind of for protection. And you feel, like you said, protected, you feel anchored, you feel supported. And it's not all about, go, do. We tend to overperform to compensate for sometimes the lack of spirituality, like I'm not very spiritual. I'm just going to achieve. But they teach us, we were taught as kids. And by the way, that book, The Choice, I do have it. I haven't read it yet. Yeah. It was gifted to me, actually. Somebody sent it to me. I don't remember who. But it is one of the most amazing examples, surviving something like Auschwitz and then picking up. How do you pick up from there? Like, it's almost like you have to go into this chamber to recalibrate and reprogram your neural, plasticity in order to go back into reality after that nightmare. But what I'm trying to say, that if we are in the hamster wheel, constantly trying to produce, perform, achieve, and not taking that time to reconnect with our spirituality. And that's humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. Humans, and I always tell my patients that the human body has not evolved to deal with for example, all the sugars that we eat. It hasn't really evolved. There is no mechanism in your body that could actually take on the amount of preservatives and the chemicals and the sugars that we are putting in our body, creating the decay, ending up with high blood pressure, ending up with high cholesterol, ending up with diabetes, and I have young patients that have, those side effects because the lifestyle, it's very, very, tense, lifestyle. They're go. They're overachievers and they're amazing. They're like, a lot of them executive and they climbed up the ladder real fast. But with what price they are paying for it.
Yeah.
Why is this happening? I don't have time to come in and check things out. I don't have time to fix things.
Yeah.
Because mentally we have evolved, right? Because our brain has the amazing ability to adapt to what all these digital devices and all the technology we can learn, definitely.
Yeah.
But the body itself is not evolving as fast as our brain is evolving.
Yeah.
So that's when you need to shut it down, disconnect and unplug, and kind of just have that moment of stillness. Now, spirituality ultimately teaches us about being human. You know, it's all about humanity. And unfortunately, when we get caught up with the everyday race, I call it, we forget about humanity. And we are the perfect example of how two people completely two different parts of the world. Dana's even further. She's in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And, you know, different background and different, you know, faith and different, you know, principles and fundamentals of how we grew up. But what brings us together, humanity, that I believe is the building block to our world. But what happened was the post-pandemic, I think COVID really made people, it was either black and white. Some people that were stuck at home for about 3 months, they just couldn't deal with it. But some people really did a number on their recalculating, reassessing their values and their belief system, the beliefs that did not serve them well. And they realized with the 3 months we got stuck at home that they really took the time to figure out what's important, what's not. Right. I have a lot of patients that are completely different people, pre-COVID and post-COVID. And you mentioned it earlier that it is the response to that profound instability in the world, and that's trauma. Yeah, they you know, it wasn't like war or anything like that, but it was trauma because everything shut down, and then going back trying to feel that we need to find a purpose for our existence. But the only answer, as far as I'm concerned, is humanity. And humanity is going to lead you to spirituality. I'm not trying to say everybody has to be religious and praying every single day. Yeah. Spirituality, whether you believe in nature, go into nature and just disconnect. If you believe in, you know, some religions, they believe that animals are gods. Go back, have an animal, hug an animal, spend more time with animals in the farm, or take care of horses or whatever it is. And that will bring you back to that connection, and you're going to find that purpose, like you said, you know, because people are looking for quality, not quantity these days. And that's what Gen X really started to hint to. And iGen, they're very, very, very smart, generation, because the whole world is just digital right now. But you can tell they are definitely looking for quality than quantity.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I want to go back to, you were talking about, like, you know, people before COVID, or just and I would just say, you know, people who experience some level of trauma, you know, that your body goes into fight, flight, freeze, right? It is assessing the world as an unsafe place, that you are unsafe. And when you don't have people or tools to kind of help you move through that, your body can get stuck in a lack of safety. And so life very much can become about trying to, not only is your body physically trying to, avoid danger. So it gets stuck in like hyper alert, and that in our nervous system, you know, it's not even just about what we know to be true, but it's what our bodies is able to feel and experience as safe. And so a lot of this can be, you know, the hustle to make more money, to accumulate more things, to, you know, whatever it is that I think I need to do in order to create safety in the world for me. You know, we get caught in that rat race, right? And then the problem with that, and I don't know. I think I heard Arthur Brooks talk about this recently. I don't know where it originally comes from, but is that arrival fallacy that, if I do this, then I will have this and I will be safe. If I do the hard work, just put my nose to the grindstone, work, then I will have money. I will have power. I will have security, and I will be safe. And what we know from testimony after testimony, and even my own experiences of, moving into that space, is that I get there and I realize I still don't feel safe. I still don't feel fulfilled. I still don't feel, happy, whatever the being is that we want. And then I think, another mindset that we can get stuck in, and you kind of named this a little bit, is that, once I have all, the resources, once I have the time, once I have the, the opportunity, the favor, the job, then I will be able to do, the self-care. Then I will be able to do these things, and then I will be able to be happy, to be safe, to be whatever it is. So I think that the healthy invitation, the one that I find to be, the most, life-giving thing, is to really, take some agency in our being. I have a choice to be something. I can be courageous right now. I don't, it's digging deep into who I am, who I was created to be, realizing that I have the resources of that within myself, that I don't need to find that, in other people and other things and other places, that I can dig in and go deep and find, if that's my connection with God, in my connection with God. Oh, I have the ability to be kind, to be generous, to be courageous, to be fearless, and that being then gets to inform what I do. And doing, is my behavior comes from a place of identity, security, and choice of being, which informs my behavior, which informs what I end up, the outcome, the results, so I think that I see people returning to that, way of being, model of living. They've hit, a wall, whether they've done all the doing, whether are sick of, that waiting around for the opportunity to come to them. I think this is one of the things I really admire about you and hearing your story, is a decision to be something, not just wait for somebody else to give you permission to do that. Or realizing hey, life isn't about just accomplishment and accumulating things. It's about, none of those things matter in the end. We're not taking that stuff with us when we go, it's really wanting to tap into the legacy I want to have.
We have reached the end of our hour. As a reminder, these episodes are uploaded weekly on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube by the Mindset Mastery Moments. If you have enjoyed this, please like, share, and hit the notification bell. That way you won't miss any episode, and it's free. This community is sponsored by humanity and supported by everyday people's stories. So please find us, join us, support us, and as always, be kind. Thank you for watching and listening. Hope to see you next time. This is Slava the Jordanian.